I think it's quite interesting, and I also think it's really great for our region that Emily was from here. I think at the time of her death, it did change everything for women, because her death, which was just an accident, it wasn't a deliberate act, was recorded on by a TV crew, and that film was sent all over the world. So thousands of people turned up for her funeral. So because of her death, the story of the suffragette movement was actually spread far and wide throughout our country and further afield, and it really was the beginnings of the government changing their rules about allowing women to have the vote, which is what they were fighting for. And Emily started her day from here in Long Horsley, and I don't think many people knew that. And probably a lot of local people didn't really know that either. And she spent weeks and weeks and weeks practicing how to pin the suffragette colours onto the horse, and that's what she was going to do at the Epsom Derby. For me, my understanding of feminism is that women are just treated equally, the same way as men. So we're a long way away from that, especially when it comes to salaries. The salaries of women's in the UK for women is much lower from that of the same job for a man. I think that's the key for me, that it doesn't really matter what sex you are, whether you're a man or a woman. You should be treated exactly in exactly the same way. If you're doing the same thing or the same job, you should be treated in the same way. And to me, that was what was really important.
That the vast majority of people for that organisation do. And we know as women, personally and professionally, that any organisation has rotten apples, and we haven't shut down Parliament, we haven't shut down the film industry, we haven't shut down the BBC, so we were determined that we were keeping Oxfam. Whilst a lot has changed, there's a huge distance still to travel. So women are still subject to huge amounts of abuse, on the whole range, from, what people call light harassment, which, when it goes on and on and on and on and on, and it's you hear it in place after place after place. It's not liked. It's like a drip feed of always having your body commented on, your behaviour commented on, your how much you speak out commented on. So when I was in my early 20s, and I couldn't have a bank account without a male guarantor. That wasn't necessarily legally required, but you just couldn't get it. I couldn't have a hire purchase agreement, so I couldn't get a loan on a car, even if I was working full time. And in the 80s and the 90s, people said, "Oh, well, you've got equality now. It's all right." And I used to say, "No, it's not. It's just gone underground." So what's come up in the last sort of 12 months, less than that, is just fantastic, because it's like women are saying, "No, we've just actually had enough of this. We're just not freaking going to put up with it anymore. We are going to speak to it. We are going to call it out."
I think even when women get positions of power, they still have to deal with that, because I've worked with a lot of senior managers who are women in education, and they still have to deal with some of the rubbish that people talk about constantly. People that they're taking for granted, they try to take advantage of them, and not in a physical way, but in a professional way. They still come across that and have to deal with it all the time. I think the most common one in education has been with what used to be called school secretaries, now office managers, and they're given an awful lot of responsibility and very poor wages. So they can be, their responsibilities can be the equivalent of sometimes a deputy head teacher, and they're asked to do it on a very low wage, really. I think a lot of the controversy is created by people who are wary of their positions being weakened by it. They're unsure about what that means for them, and that's usually the men that are in power who are frightened of that word. I'm not sure the rest of us are.
No. Do you want me to expand on that?
Yeah, sure.
I think that it depends what context you're looking at. Obviously, there is, in some ways, there has been a huge amount of progress in achieving equality between women and men, but that equality is often based on a number of assumptions and rules about the space in which that equality exists. Yeah, so feminism often inspires quite, I wouldn't say negative responses, but quite strong responses. And for many years, it was a word that we used to avoid because we didn't want to upset people. And I think often that's because feminism has been associated with challenging established notions of power and established ways of doing things. And people don't like real change. They like to the tinkering around the edges, that individualized notion of allowing individual women to operate as well as individual men in existing spaces is palatable. But feminist analysis is much more about changing the spaces. It's much more about kind of overturning existing structures and existing rules. And that's a very frightening prospect.
Doing this documentary, I found that people's view on feminism can be completely misinterpreted. It was interesting to see the different views of the individuals that I interviewed, as it gave me a new perspective on the subject. Even though there has been mass development in the form of equality, maybe we do have a little more to go.